Call this meeting to order. So this is the Brownsville Public Utilities Board Regulatory and Policy Committee meeting on September 27th at 1:32 p.m. We're at the BPUB Annex Building, and we'll start the agenda with any public comments. No public comments? All righty, thank you. So we'll start going through the items. I know that we had some discussions on a couple of these already. We were planning to table. So I wanted to see if there was any motion or consideration for item one.
Motion to table item one. But I'll make a motion that we table item one.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. So we'll, I'm also for that, so we'll go ahead and table item one, and we'll review that in our next committee meeting. Moving on to item number two, which is discussion and presentation of revisions of the Brownsville PUB personnel policies and procedures, policy number 30, computer, electronic mail, and internet use. Do you have any motion there?
Chair, this is another item you'd like to table?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we table this item, item number two.
I will second.
Okay, motion passes. And we'll move on to item number three, discussion and presentation of the Brownsville PUB Personnel Policies and Procedure Manual.
Ready in a heartbeat. Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. My name is Sergio Delgadillo. I'm the Compensation Benefits Manager under HR. And I'll be going over item number three, presentation, discussion of the Brownsville Public Utilities Board Personal Policies and Procedures. So our current policy handbook contains 41 policies and 2 supplemental documents. These would be the anti-fraud policy and the employee code of conduct. Of course, these are not part of the numbering. The policy handbook was initially adopted by the board in 1978. And over the years, it has gone through many revisions, including some additions to policies as needed. The last full review to the policy manual was in between 2002, 2003. Most recently, in May of this year, we updated the manual to the new policy format. So that was a change to all the manual, but not to all the content of the policies. It's just basically a formatting change. Additionally, in June of this year, we made the most recent changes to our sick leave policy. So the HR division has made a commitment to review, update, revise, and present for adoption no less than 3 policies per year. But we understand this may seem like a low number. We will continue to make it a priority to work on policies. As much as time we can invest into that process. For example, this year we have been working on the personal appearance policy, the use of technology, the hours of work and overtime, call out standby pay. Most of the leave policies, which we show you what the category is for that, including, of course, FMLA, military leave, holiday, and funeral. So personal policies, like the personal appearance and the use of technology, these are the ones that we just tabled. They are under final review. And of course, we're hoping to return to this committee very soon with the proposed policies.
Quick question on this. So are the 41 policies that is just for the HR portion, or is that all of the policies?
No, these are just personnel policies or
Personnel
policies
related
have been
policies.
identified as personnel policies.
Okay. Do we know how many policies we have overall?
I wouldn't know that number. We do have several policies that reside in other divisions. I can think of process improvement policy, for example. But yes, we do have other policies. They're not part of this manual.
Okay.
So currently, the policy manual is not ordered by type of policy. And what we have is a list of policies that have been included in the manual as they were created. So all of these policies we've categorized into 8 big buckets, as you can see in the slide above. And of course, the majority of these policies, or a concentration of them, are in the workplace category. So once we've done the full review of all of our policies, we will standardize the numbering. We will do the category as you see in that table. Additionally, through this process, we determined that some policies currently found in the employee handbook might not be per se personnel policies. So we are working with other divisions to see where the best place for them to reside is. And of course, we have an adequate policy writer. An example would be for example, our travel policy. There might be duplicity with the finance who also handles travel, and they do have the procedural documents for it. And I believe so a policy as well. So this is under review.
I did not catch what you said.
So of course, what I mentioned before is some other divisions do have their own policies. So within those policies, we might have some duplication of language. It is still appropriate to the main policy, but it's now duplicated. So we've seen that we might just need to either have it reside on the personal handbook, or maybe reside with the other division, along with the other policies that they may administer.
So is this a handbook that is handed to every new employee
Yes, every employee gets a hold of all these policies.
and they don't get travel policies with them?
They do. I mean, all the travels, all our policies are available to our BPV Central, to all employees, and they're all taught that.
Can you repeat that? They're available?
Yes, all of our policies, I'm very sorry. All of our policies are available in PUB Central. That is our intranet, where all employees have a login and they can look at directives, policies, procedures, announcements. It's our internal intranet. That's what it means, right? It's called PUB Central, and all policies are available to them. When any employee or whatever employee is hired through new orientation, they do get a copy of this handbook or the personal policies and procedures, which basically outlines everything that has to do with their employment. Some policies, like I said, for example, and I mentioned this example right now as a travel policy, it is very intimate with the finance department, which handle all the requesting leave, requesting the professional, making the request for professional, making the request for professional leave, I'm so sorry. And then doing all what it has to do with submitting all the receipts for reimbursement. So there's a lot of guidance through that. That's what we're suggesting. We need to work with them to see if any of that needs to be here or this needs to be there among that review.
Each department manages their own policies, or is there a person or role that's responsible for all policies?
I might not be the best suited to answer that
Yeah.
question.
Let me go
because
ahead
we
and
have-
answer that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
We have a records manager for the organization who's also our public information officer, and all of the policies are managed through that. We are in the process of having an enterprise records management program that consolidates everything. I just texted her to find out how many policies we have. And so at one point, there was like procedure to how to write a policy and things of that nature. We've changed to a new format. And so when the new format was changed, I just need to identify how many policies does that prevail is. So there is a centralized location and database for policies.
Yeah, I think it would be good. Obviously, this is probably the most impactful, because it's affecting all the employees. But yeah, if we can get visibility into how many other policies there are, maybe have something similar with the categories, just so we have kind of a general understanding of the policies.
Right. And just to answer and elaborate a little bit more on that, we also have charters, we also have resolutions, and everything is in a centralized database that we are keeping where everything is located. So what we'll do is we'll gather that. We did provide for the board, as you're part of your new orientation package, some of those individualized policies that apply to the board, which is the board governance and bylaws and things of those natures, and all the charters for all the various different committees on there.
Well, looping back to the review that we're conducting, of course, also some other policies might be combined. That's one of the things we're proposing for policy 30, for example, combining 2 policies. And we'll see that in further slides. as we go through the presentation.
And one more question. So
Yes,
you were saying that like the employee handbook itself is not categorized this way. It just has the policies listed as they were created.
that is true. Yes.
That sounds hard to find information.
So we are, again, making a lot of efforts into improving this process. We do focus on the main policies when we do new orientation with the employees, or new employee orientation per se, and I do have a listing of exactly what we go through with them as they're coming in to a company.
Thank you.
Sure thing. So moving into the actual categories as listed, what are policies included under benefit policies? Well, we have our workers' compensation and return to work policy. Of course, our workers' compensation, we consider a benefit. And this one will provide employees involved in a work-related injury workers' comp per se. It's also embedded in this policy, how an employee can return to work. It includes language and accommodations. And then we'll jump to what it's a BPUV educational assistance policy. BPUV covers tuition reimbursement program. Our current program provides for 60% of reimbursement for eligible tuition fees and books for undergraduate programs. We'll have policy number 21, which is retirement. Our employees are covered under the Texas Municipal Retirement System. This policy will align the benefits and employee eligibility requirements. It also talk about benefits for employees that meet certain time employed at BPUV in terms of health benefits. Policy number 23, insurance. This is a very brief policy. Talks about the commitment of BPUV to provide group health and life insurance for employees. So moving to our next category, classification and compensation policies. This includes two policies. The position classification manual, policy number 3, is one of the policies that may go away because we no longer maintain a position classification manual as described in the policy. Instead, BPUV has approved a pay plan in a position matrix, which lists all the positions, all the categories. It includes all the job titles by area, salary ranges. Additionally, job descriptions are now automated and stored electronically in job description database rather than a paper or manual. So that policy, it's outdated in that sense, and we are doing most of what it says there, but in a different fashion as described. So we believe that that's a policy that could potentially go away. It's more of a procedural. Policy number 4, classification and compensation policy, was most recently updated 2018, and it includes BPUV's commitment to equal employment. This policy also lists the types of personal actions. This policy is supplemented by BPUV classification and compensation program, which is a document describing the types of personal actions and their impact to the employee's pay. So hiring, demotion, transfer, promotion, additional duties, all of that will be described in there. So we have employment policies. For the employment policies, we'll start with employment and personal procedures. As the title suggests, it's a very procedural document rather than a policy. And a lot of the language will be removed. This policy also covers some of the nepotism language that we now have residing in a different policy. So another policy that we are needing to work on. It does talk about the process of hiring, of application. So it's in use, but of course, most likely belongs to a procedure than a policy document. Policy number 5, appointments. It describes the different types of employment based on full-time, part-time, and temporary categories. In this policy, it also states which categories or types of appointments are eligible for benefits. Policy number 15, hours of work and overtime. This policy also includes language on call pay, standby, and callback provisions. We are currently working on this policy. This is as a result of an audit finding. And we're also considering separating this policy into 2 different documents, whereas we can address hours of work and then standby and call-out pay as a separate document. The grievance policy, which was most recently revised in 2018. This policy outlines employees' right to file a grievance or agreeable matter, such as those that have adverse action on the employee's pay or employment. A lot of the language was removed when we reviewed this policy, so this is really a policy with no procedural language in it. Our nepotism policy, as we stated, it belonged to policy 2 before. This became a standalone policy in 2018 and outlines BP requirements as the hiring of relatives and of employees, and includes language on provisions on hiring relatives of the board and the city commission. Policy 40, this is a new policy. It was adopted in 2020. The language in this policy was previously found in policy 1. It was removed to develop the standalone policy, which is our commitment to equal employment and best practices. So our next category will be paid and unpaid leave policies. I'm glad this is a big category. So you can see the table up there. This groups all the different types of leave that an employee would have access to, paid and unpaid. As we just said, aside from policy number 8, which was just recently reviewed, we are working on all the other policies. Some of these policies have to do a lot with compliance with the law, like the military, the FMLA policies, and others are benefits that employees have in terms of leave. Do you have any questions on?
No?
Perfect. Performance expectation policies. So of course, there's 2 policies in this category. They include the provisionary period, which is policy number 6, and the performance appraisal policy number 7. Policy number 6 will be reviewed and revised to remove some of the language that needs to be addressed in other policies. For instance, this policy, along of describing the provisionary period, it talks about the cost for certification. So BP bears a cost, and they are in this policy. So most likely those belong to a different policy rather than the provisionary evaluation. So they are under review. Policy number 7, most recently revised and adopted by the board in 2020. The original policy had a lot of procedural language, which was removed and is now embedded in the performance appraisal procedure document. So for the performance appraisal policy, as we drafted that policy, we also drafted a procedure that outlines all the steps to conduct the evaluations, the employee evaluations, that is. Safety policies, we have one policy under this category. This would be our safety policy statement. And this policy talks about the commitment to safety of employees. It's likely to be revised in collaboration with the Health and Safety Department.
I do want to elaborate. We do have the APPA manual adopted for safety work practices that we're following in the organization. So it's just because it's a policy statement, I don't want you all to leave with the impression that there are not other safety rules and regulations that as an industry we practice.
Yes, so to add to that, in fact, in this policy is where we are adopting the APPA manual to follow. So it's within this document that language resides as well. So standards of conduct policies. So we have 5 policies under this category. Policy number 1, it's a general policy that sets expectations for the entire manual. Some of this language in the policy has already been moved to policy number 40 regarding employment opportunity, for example. And as we move to revise other policy, this policy may evolve into an introductory policy, establishing the intent of personal policies as well as VPU's commitment for business ethics and professional conduct. Policy number 25 will likely be renamed to anti-harassment. This policy includes information about harassment in general, as well as sexual harassment. Some of the language in this policy also relates to processing a complaint, so a little bit of procedural. Would likely also be removed into standalone policy similar to our grievance policy. Policy number 29 was recently revised. Substance abuse and prevention policy was recently revised in 2018 as a result of BPU's intent to have a zero tolerance substance abuse program. So along with this policy, we developed a substance abuse and prevention procedure, which guides management through the implementation of the policy number 29. So this was some of the new ones that we created, and as well, we have the policy and we have the procedural documents next to it. And it does implement a zero tolerance policy. Policy 36, conflict of interest. Similar language found in our code of conduct policy. In fact, code of conduct does have a section on it. This is a little more elaborate of what constitutes conflict of interest. Policy number 37 is fraternization policy, which addresses provisions regarding personal relationships between employees. Most of the language has to do with supervisor and subordinate relationships, or indirectly or directly being supervised. And also has some procedural wording on how do you report that to HR. Workplace policies, where a big of the policies reside. Of course, this is a group of policies under the umbrella of workplace policies. This policy set the requirements for expected workplace behaviors in areas of outside employment, travel, use of technology, emergency response, dress code, vehicle use, records management, and the prohibited weapons. As mentioned before, some of these policies may be removed from the personal policies and procedures manual because they're already addressed by other departmental policies. Or they may not. I mean, that's under review. Policies 30 and 32 were tabled today. We do have some final revisions before presenting them to you, but those will be examples, especially policy 30, where we are recommending to combine two policies. So by implementing policy 30, we might be combining the cell phone use, and computers, internet. So that's some of the changes that now seem to fit together as technology has progressed.
Yeah, we probably don't need to go through all of them here. I think something that would help was, I know there's a plan. It sounded like reviewing the policies or so many per year. If you can outline that, just to help us understand what the general plan is. And then obviously as things come up, we can help, address any of those policy changes.
I just have a couple of comments. As I read through the policy manual, I mean, I think it's great that y'all have a policy manual. One of the things that I look at, and I've been observing, is that many of your policies are over 20 years old. I think y'all should take a really good look at any policy that's over 20 years old and try to bring it up to date. I don't know if y'all compare your policy manual with other utilities to see if you're using the same language, using the same protection language for employees as well as for the utility. Perhaps you're already doing that. But as I make a note, there's a lot of policies. For example, the one on fraternization goes back to 2000. They're over 20 years old, some of them, many of it. I'm sure y'all are aware of that, right?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of what I'm seeing is 2003, which makes it about 20 years old. 20 years old. I don't know. I don't know if you all have hired a consultant or brought anybody in to review this policy manual and bring it up to current date.
And that is what we are striving to do, to bring up to date. And what you just mentioned is part of the interactive process of reviewing a policy. So we want to tackle this and we want to tackle fast. We know it's a priority and we can see how dated some of this are. In the HR department, what we've done is that first we tried to tackle them individually and then discuss them among the group so we can now present to the committees. And then that seemed to be a not so effective process. So now what we do is that we meet in a committee setup. We all work on those policies until they are, in consensus of the committee that is working on that policy. And that's how we present it. So that's how come it takes a little bit longer. Because we all need to make sure that it reads. We do a lot of research. We make a lot of, compared to other benchmarking, other utilities. I'm not July, we have seen into school districts, for example, policies. They tend to have very, very new policies. We looked into other organizations just to make sure that we're in line with times and the language that we're using.
Direct me to the policy on progressive discipline. I know I saw it here.
Yes,
Which item is that?
this would be the next slide, effective policy number 18.
18. Okay, policy number 19, that's 2000, last revised 2018, adopted in 2003. I mean, the policies of this utility are very important to the board. Obviously, y'all have the responsibility to have a policy manual that's in place, that's fair, that protects the utility and that protects employees. I just think, just from my understanding of policy manuals in a large organization, I really think that y'all need to really perhaps consult with an external consultant to bring these policies up to date, maybe even legal. I'm not sure, but I'll leave that up to administration. I heard you early in your presentation, some of these policies go, what's the oldest policy that comes to your mind?
The last full review of this policies was 2002, 2003. So that would be 20 years. That's the last full review with on this policy. So that's around the 20-year mark that you.
Mike, is that so you remember it? Or I know you don't get involved in this, but
Just apologies. I mean, I'm only been here 17 years, Mr.
you're exempt from answering that.
But yeah, no, like Sergio's saying, it was 2002, 2003 is when all those personal policies were last reviewed. So it's been 20 years since that review.
Ms. Gilbert, what are your thoughts on that?
One of the things that we're doing and what we noticed as I was working with HR is that we need to revise the personnel policies, and they told me it was going to be a little bit of time and undertaking, and we agreed to provide the resources to be able to do that. 1 or 2 policies a year is not something that I am in favor of, because obviously it was going to take us another 10 years to review, but the intent is that we need additional resources is to have somebody review some of the policies where they need to do. We are looking into other areas of categories that we're also reviewing at this time. We're looking and revising the operational policies. There are 5 different, board policies that we have. And the manager for the records management did say that there's 35 total policies. So just like within 35 policies, and this policy has over 40 policies, that's the same similar situation in some of the other areas.
How many operation manuals do y'all have for each department, for the various departments? Operation manuals for those who drive vehicles, operation manual for those who use heavy equipment.
At the department level, then there's procedurals. And so the policy is the one that our board adopted and approved. And then there is then procedurally, how do we meet the policies in place? And so to answer the question, I'm going to have to go back and come back to you and give you procedurally, how many procedures do we have throughout the organization? Because at this time, I don't have that.
I'm just thinking,
information.
Marilyn, if a person is assigned to a field office or somewhere out in the field where they're using heavy equipment, I would imagine they receive a operation manual, which is a set apart from policy on how to use that piece of equipment, how to drive this vehicle, do y'all must have something in place like that.
Operationally, I would have to defer right now to operations to see exactly, we can come back to the report to report what happens. I know we have job safety processes, various different things. I know there's been audits in some of those areas that has been provided to the board. We address any type of findings that, it addresses the safety. But I can't go into the detail. I don't know if you've looked into it recently to the details.
It's not about operational manual by equipment manufacturer.
Right. I do know, like, as an example, is that if an operator is not certified to operate that equipment, then that equipment sits idle and does not get operated. So in other words, we don't let people to use equipment that they don't meet the proper license requirements, certifications and things, because some of these things, when we order a new piece of equipment, the fleet has to go and inspect, and then at that point, we need to train the employee. So we don't let people go out like on a bucket truck that comes in and it has all these bells and whistles. They have to be trained to operate that because that's a safety issue. And I know that process is in place. To tell you what it details, I can't tell you what it is. We'll have to come back and give you a presentation on that.
I mean, I think you obviously have a comprehensive manual. The manual is a little bit outdated. I know y'all are trying to work on that. I know y'all have some complicated equipment that's used out there. And I'm sure the employees are receiving training. Just something I wanted to put on the table as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's general agreement that there's an opportunity, right, to review and update, the different policies. I think the challenge is going to be is identifying, and prioritization, essentially, right, how to go through it. So yeah, maybe a third party could help, if that's of potential help, to give you the big picture and help you kind of break it down a little bit. You guys can consider that and let us know.
So I want to understand better. So we're looking only at the policies for the HR department,
Yes.
right? And are you the director of that department?
No, I'm a manager, compensation and benefits manager. The director is right there. Dr. Emilia Guerra.
Okay. And so it is up to you to decide how they will be updated in the timeline. Is that right? Or who is in charge of that?
So we're discussing what policies to address or how fast or quick to address them. What is the question? Sorry.
I want to know, so who it really decides how to implement what this committee is saying? This committee is essentially saying that the policies are probably not adequate right now and that we need to, bring them up to, an adequate level of standard. Whether that I mean, there's different ways of, like understanding what that means. But I want to know who essentially is, will be in charge of this process.
Personal policies, and we have been looking at these policies since 2015. There was a period of time when we did hire a consultant, and then the policies the formatting changed, things like that. So we've been looking at these, and we've been trying to prioritize things that we know are an issue. So like, for instance, right now, our dress code policy and our music technology policy, those are priorities, not only for us, but for executive management. For our employees, our sick leave policy was a policy that we needed to make improvements on. And I understand that some of these policies are outdated, but even though they're outdated and the language is not in our policy, we follow the law. So I'll give you an example. FMLA has now, the law for FMLA has changed. And now we are required to offer military leave. I don't know the exact.
There was military leave regarding that.
So you see in our FMLA policy, military leave is not included in there, but we follow the law. And so even though it's not in there, we do provide an employee development for military leave. We do follow the law.
You just don't let them know when they first come in? That's an option, or?
When we go out, when we do our employee orientation, we try to cover as many policies, and send has a slide on that. We try to cover as many policies as we can. We can't cover the entire manual because then we'll be there for a few days, right? But we do, whenever there's a change to the law, that we communicate that. We are required to post the legal requirements regarding FMLA, which still include military leave. And just because the policy doesn't say it, we do follow the law.
My concern with outdated policies is not only what, what is there that may, I mean, could be legal. I don't know. I don't know the law, right? I'm not an HR expert. But there might be things in there that we should not have in there. But then there's also things that should be in there that are not in there. So if this was, if PUB, let's say, were a new organization, completely new, you would not have the time to take, how many years was that it would take to update all these policies? 10? Is that?
Just commit to 2, 3 per year. Yes, it's going to take us a long time.
So, right, so if this were a new organization, you would not have that time. How would you come up with, an employee handbook essentially? How would you accomplish that?
If this were a new organization, we would probably, I would say we would go out and look for a consultant that help us to develop a personal policy for employees, if this were a new organization. Now, some of these policies, the manual was established in 1978, I believe, and in 2002, 2003, the entire manual was looked at, and changes were made at that point as needed. And then over the years, we've made updates to individual policies. Our nepotism policy is one, for instance, that it was embedded in policy number 2 or 1, and we removed it and we made it a standalone policy at the request of either the board at the time, executive management at the time. So we've been doing those kind of changes, but I would suspect if we were a new organization, yeah, we would reach out to somebody from the outside to help us. And actually there are companies that sell us, like the software, the policies, like a template of all policies.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. I think in general is just, take this opportunity and come back and let us know, or we work with the administration to see what plan you guys can come up with, either external or purchasing. It just seems that having them outdated, it's a risk to the operation, right?
Yeah, and if you all are willing to entertain us going out again and hiring a consultant to help us with this, we can do the research. We can put out an RFP. We have talked to Mr. Pequeño, and we are going to be working very closely with them as we go through. They will help us also make sure that we have the policies that we need to have in place. But
Maybe, I just want to make 2 comments and we'll move on. I do think the policy manual is outdated. The other item is, if you have an employee that has been accused of sexual harassment and y'all deal with this employee, how do you, what additional support do you provide to that employee? Are they required to observe, to watch videos to rehabilitate them, or are y'all required to provide any type of action to the employee so they won't do it again?
so there are certain mandatory training requirements that all employees go through, and it's like either annually or every 2 years. But if we've ever investigated a case of harassment, we do an investigation. And if we've ever found that there is reason for termination of employment, that's where we go.
Well, that's where progressive discipline is very important. It depends on the
Severity.
opinion,
Mhm.
depends on the severity. But I'm going to ask Ms. Gilbert, with the chair's permission, that we probably for the November meeting, that we place this item on the agenda for the entire board to discuss. And then we'll work with Mr. Pequeño and his law group, law office. I think we need to get a little more engaged in this and provide and get some support on updating the policy. Obviously, you guys have been working with the college for a long time. And it's our responsibility to provide oversight and what we're doing. And it's good that you have a policy, but it can be improved. And I think there's a concern here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have to read the whole thing. I mean, we get.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. Even the next slide, I think we're good. That's the general message is, I think there's an opportunity there. And we can look at different options, you know, a third party is an option. Doing something internally is another option, right? So you guys can take it back and work with the administration, let us know how we can support it.
Bring a plan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So your book does have all of the details of the policies in there and where it is in the policies that are the most outdated are the ones that we're targeting first, you know, and so there's other policies that have been updated that are more recent on there. This is one of the reasons why it's important to have this committee meet regularly and the updates that we're doing it, and we'll come back in the November as suggested with a timeline on how we plan to address these policies as well as others that I know Mark Dombrowski is working with operations, but it's going to take some time also to update some of the electrical policies as well.
Okay, yeah, just, I think that sounds good. Moving on to the next item, number 4 is just a discussion and or request for future agenda items. I think, that request is pretty clear now. I don't know if there's any other specific ones for specific policies.
We'll have administration start working on the items.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Yep, and in our next meeting, we can also evaluate the ones from item 1 and 2, because I know those
Yes,
have been modified and you're looking for some feedback or approval there, so.
yes. On 1 and 2, the reason that we requested the tabling was that we were making some modifications. It wouldn't be fair for our legal department to review them at the last minute when those modifications were made, and we'll work with the various different depending. Some of the policies are going to special counsel, some of the policies are going to local counsel.
Okay. That's all the items on the agenda. Any motion? To adjourn?
I second.
All righty. Thank you, everybody.